Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the Star Wars Lads for a slightly postponed. Unfortunately, yesterday I had some issues with the Mask of Fear review. We had some encoding issues, and it just wasn't exporting for such a long time. So if you were waiting for it to come out day of, that was the plan. Things just didn't happen expected. So, we just had to make do, figure out some sort of solution, and I did. But put that out pretty late last night, so I didn't feel like making you guys kinda come and join, and it keeps on getting delayed as I'm working through everything, so it wasn't worthwhile, so but we got a lot of news, we got a lot of very interesting things for this week in Star Wars, so uh, you can definitely tell just by the thumbnail that I've created that there's some pretty big news and some really interesting things to have discussions about. So, yeah, no, I mean, for sure, we can get into all of them. I'll kind of explain my thoughts on the three main ones. There's a couple other auxiliary ones as well, but for the most part, this should be fun and this should be a pretty good live Q&A that has a balance of news and just the questions that you guys have. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into the big one right now, which is Kathleen Kennedy retiring by the end of 2025. And then some sources saying that she's not going to. So where we stand right now, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't really know what to say. It's like it seemed pretty concrete, Puck News, the Hollywood Reporter picked them up. They were saying all these things about like, hey, this is what's happened. This is what's gonna be like. Yeah, that's what's happening. And then for some reason, CNN is now disputing it. I really don't understand honestly what is going on. I've kind of come to the point of conclusion that she is in some sort of state of mind of wanting to kind of quit. She's not necessarily as interested in being president after honestly a pretty long tenure in films and everything. So I can understand that being the president of Lucasfilm, overseeing that first era of Disney. Disney's definitely reforming a lot of stuff with Marvel and Star Wars brand in general. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but is it necessarily gonna happen now with how quickly it's been refuted? I don't know. I feel like I always considered that she was going to be very much, like, locked into New Jedi Order. Rey was the character brought into the Skywalker saga to help spearhead, and it makes sense with all the reports that Rey is apparently still the most marketable character of new Star Wars besides, like, The Mandalorian Grogu that hasn't got a continuation of sorts. So, yeah, I never considered it as something that was gonna be happening anytime soon, and then getting this news, I was like, "Okay, clearly it's on her mind." I mean, she's not as young as she once was, she's 72, that's gotta be a strain. That's usually around the time most people are retired from work, and it shouldn't be any different with entertainment. So, if she wants to leave after, honestly, what's been a fairly fruitful career and one of the greatest producing careers in history, why not, right? Like, I really don't see any good reason for her to continue another 5, 10 years. Like, that's just not gonna be fun, and Star Wars, whether you love it or hate it, we all know that it's gonna be very intense, it's gonna be very fierce, and it's gonna be a difficult position to lead. Like, whoever's gonna come next, whether it be an internal hire, someone we already know about, or someone else from a different studio who's managed sort of to handle all this sort of presidential duties of a studio head, it's still gonna be hard. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think 2025, that was kinda leaked out. There's rumors that she was apparently ready to make a statement at the end of last year, but stayed on because Iger is now planning on retiring again. I don't know. It feels like there was so much concrete stuff happening there, so much concrete discussions, and now it's like, okay, well, maybe she was kinda just testing the waters. So, that's how I think about it. It's so uneven. There's nothing like, officially from her. I'm not gonna take it as anything more than that, right? I think it's a bit silly to expect her to kinda come out and be like, "Oh, no, like, I'm not retiring right now," or like, "I am retiring right now." It should be on her terms. whether you like what she's done as a Lucasfilm president or not, and I think frankly under her stewardship, it still has been pretty strong. There are some things that are disappointing for sure. There's a huge push in Disney Plus that happened with Marvel as well that diluted the brand in some ways, absolutely. But Star Wars has never been stronger since post prequels. I know we were all excited for the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith and all that, but you go back just a decade ago, people wanted nothing to do with that. Clone Wars is only known to people watching it on Cartoon Network and kids, basically. The Star Wars brand needed Iger to kind of go with a little bit more of a traditional Star Wars film, with Kennedy to be that bridge between Spielberg, Lucas, and Disney and what they think about Star Wars, what they think about their own brands and all that. So, yeah, I was never the biggest fan of her, but I think things about Iger's biography saying like, "Yes, I pushed for Episode 9 to come out in 2019. I wanted all these films in between." Kathleen was the kind of pushing back. JJ is kind of pushing back. It does make me feel a little bit better that she was still trying to do a lot of good things as the head of the studio that was in line with, the people she worked around, the creatives who were part of the New Hollywood movement in the 60s that changed everything after the studio systems fell apart. So, I she deserves her flowers. You can be critical about her work as a Lucasfilm head all you want, but I thought she was primed for it. Things just didn't work out perfectly. This is the machine that is Disney in some ways. And, now we look for a new fresh start, but I expect her to still be around the scene. Expect her to finish up New Jedi Order, produce a film here or there, but maybe not just deal with the stress of being a studio head. That's hard for anybody to do. And who could be next? I don't know. I think that's a tough question to ask. I want to say that maybe, maybe it'll be Favreau. I don't see Filoni. He just became a the chief creative officer, right? So I think that's something he needs to learn to balance along with his responsibilities with continuing out the Ahsoka story and everything else there. Favreau's got a huge amount of production experience, a great famous producer. He's already worked on the MCU. He is the godfather of that basically. So he would be someone I think would be ready for this, and he's made the transition to TV, at least for the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, extraordinary well. So he'd be someone that could handle this. Does he wanna be tied down by the franchise even further after Mandoverse kinda exploded into a thing after just being a fun little show about a bounty hunter who finds a little green alien that looks like Yoda? I don't know. That's that's a tough one to say. Besides them, I mean, I'd assume you have to be from someone that's not so wrapped up in what's going on in other studios, like, it can't be an Zaslav or anybody else there, right? Like, it can't be Warner Brothers, it can't be Paramount. I don't expect it to be someone being recruited from outside unless they're coming from an upstart studio and looking with fresh ideas or a very successful studio second to Disney at the box office this year or something. All the people that are dealing with that, with the streaming bubble exploding and all that, I don't expect them to slide into Kathleen seat and suddenly fix everything, right? And frankly, I think a lot of it still also falls on Chapek. The push for content that absolutely came from Iger, but you don't put that in the hands of Chapek, who was known for the DVD, straight to VHS idea for a lot of the golden age Disney animation films, which like what are you doing there, right? Like it wasn't super well loved then. Putting that into streaming with how massive the budgets are in comparison, yeah, it might have gotten you some business, but I'm sure it lost you a lot of continuing long-term business from people who were a little bit more casually into Star Wars who probably were interested for 2 to 3 years, right? So, after Rogue One and everything had come out, that initial great hype wave. So yeah, those are my kind of quick rambly thoughts on the subject. I think we just have to wait and see. I give flowers to Kathleen, an incredible, incredible producer. Maybe pushed into a position as a studio head that she was never truly ready for, but I think she's had a lot more go right than wrong, and she's at least when it comes to filmmaking, having the same sort of influence successfully that I think a late stage Lucas had before the Clone Wars, where he was having a very mixed bag with especially projects outside of the prequels. So Yeah, hope that whatever decision she chooses to do is what's best for her, and just excited for the next stage. It seems like been a lot of rumblings about proper planning out. That's gonna always be the biggest thing I'll harp about with Iger, Kathleen, everybody involved with Disney and Star Wars at the start of that first deal being made between Lucas and Disney. Should have had a better road plan and should have been executed by only, like, a specific core group, a specific group of directors who are all working together, who know what they're gonna build off of, even if their individual films are different. So, those are my thoughts there. But let me jump into the chat here, see if anybody has anything else about that, any of their thoughts on Kathleen Kennedy, on the situation that's changing there with Lucasfilm. Anthony Tiff says, "I honestly don't have an opinion on Kathleen Kennedy retiring because as I think she has been in the game for a while, and it's good to pass the torch. I do not like, however, that she has been the target of hate. The fandom menace even has memes of her being Satan. Okay, it's fine if you don't like Disney stars, but to make yourself out to be Neo fighting the Matrix in a superhero complex is going too far. I know, as I've already seen it, the fandom menace claim this as a victory. I just hope this is not an excuse to attack the sequel or Disney fans and those who like both the EU and canon, which is what I am." Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree with everything you're saying here, Anthony. It is, a choice that she's got to make, and she's earned it, regardless of anything that's happened since 2014, 2015. All the big franchises, all the stuff that's laid the foundation for these mega franchises like the MCU and everything that Feige, until very recently has been considered like the golden child for. It started with people like Kathleen. She was considered the mega producer of her day. You don't just do Jurassic Park, you don't do Indiana Jones, you don't do these incredible Spielberg and Lucas films unless you're well respected, unless you're good at your job there. They were hoping because she was around these creatives who not only changed the game of the industry, but also were able to bring in creative people, that maybe she would be a solid mentor and still manage to do the production side like she had always done, but nurture creatives like Lord and Miller, for example. And I honestly think that's probably a bigger crux point than anything, because even if people didn't like The Last Jedi, if that film had a little bit more control, if they didn't leave, if they didn't have to reshoot the budget twice over, yeah, I think there would have been a good chance that she would have been able to foster the Star Wars brand as a place in live action and animation, whatever you want to be, as a place where new creators are expected to grow in and approach other franchise, approach other studios with their own ideas, and do what Chris Lord and Miller are definitely doing right now, but maybe not to the same extent as what everyone kind of expected when they signed on as the solo filmmakers, as the solo directors. So things have definitely changed. It just is how it is. But I agree, Anthony Tiff. I don't want the hate to be spread to sequel fans and all this and that. And I know some of it comes from Kathleen wearing the Forces female shirts and all that. And Phantom Menace absolutely jumped on that. But that wasn't even Star Wars related. That was from her at a Nike event for Nike Air Forces, right? And it's such a sad thing to try to explain and show off, but once you put in enough thumbnails, that's just how it's gonna be, right? So, unfortunate, that's how it is. She doesn't deserve this hate. She doesn't deserve the Satan memes and all this and that, right? You can be critical about her work. Everybody should. That's the whole point of art. It is subjective. But when we're looking at her acumen, at her portfolio, at her legacy, it's only going to be positive, really. Like I find it really sad, disheartening that, when we have other female creatives, especially in a film industry that still does not have a lot of female directed films. And Kathleen has definitely pushed to bring female filmmakers like Deborah Chow and everyone else into the field here. Yes, some mixed results. No one's going to deny that. But there's a lot of different pieces in the puzzle, right? It's not just all on a female director, a female writer, and all that. These are massive productions, and one or two things cascading can make all the difference. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I agree with all your points there. And then looking into the chat here, Brandon Tran says, "Do you think John Favreau or Pablo Hidalgo could step up as a new Lucasfilm president?" I'll answer this one first. Not Hidalgo. He's kind of more the historian. Phantom Menace through Star Wars theory also kind of hates him. And to be fair, he was a bit harsh in his joke on a private Twitter account. but it kinda just became a huge dramatic thing instead of something that coulda just been resolved between the 2 of them. And he's not really there to, like, be the creator. He's there to help create for sure, but he's more like a historian like Leland Shee. He's there to keep control of the culture, make sure that everybody understands this is Star Wars as it was under George Lucas. I am one of those people who got to work alongside him, and I can be a valuable portion of input. That's how I look at that, right? So, no to Hidalgo. Like I said in my whole spiel, Favreau is a good choice if he's looking forward to it and wants to do it. There's some rumors that he was sick for a bit for Mandalorian Grogu, and somehow it ballooned into, oh, he just directly remote directed the entire film. He didn't want to be on set and stress, but people are like he was out for a couple of days sick and it's precautionary, right? So there's a lot of weird things going on about where he stands with Star Wars, and I'm sure that maybe he's got a little bit more mixed feelings now than he did in 2020 after the massive success of Mando season 1 and 2 when him and Filoni were hailed as saviors for Star Wars, right? I'm sure, but I think he could be pretty good. It is kinda sad to say, though, that maybe he is better when he's doing smaller projects, more improvisational. Like, it's famously known now that Iron Man 2008 did not have a script, right? Him and Robert Downey Jr. kinda just did it on the fly, and then they tried to repeat that again for Iron Man 2 with Devil in a Bottle storyline and all the other things and the MCU setting up with Black Widow, Nick Fury, and it didn't work the same way, right? So maybe that's kind of how he started with The Mandalorian, and then he got tempered a little bit, got a nice little influx of Mandalorian culture, history, the George Lucas version of The Mandalorians through Filoni together. Again, Kathleen put them together. Him and Filoni probably made some incredible things, and made some incredible stories for the first 2 seasons. Once things kinda split off, they had to focus on Ahsoka with Filoni, CCO work, the chance of him getting the New Republic closer film and all that started happening. Yeah, I think that started, kind of showing the weaknesses of Favreau, who had never done television before that. So, if he's in charge of the studio, I would assume his biggest role moving forward is gonna be with the live action films more than TV shows. He's already got his fill there. Been fairly successful for sure. Maybe not as much as what could have been, but still very strong. And maybe focusing more on films, which is definitely a stronger suit where he has been a producer where he's worked with all different parts of Disney. Maybe that's where he's going to be suited for. And then your next question was some of fandom has forgotten that Kathleen Kennedy only got appointed as Lucasfilm president because she worked under Steve Spielberg when she made movies like Jurassic Park and Indiana Jones. Not everything under Kathleen Kennedy's era has been bad. We've won great video games like Fallen Order, Survivor, Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, Lego Star Wars Specials. And yeah, that's another thing, right? Like when we look at studio heads today, it's become very common now that gaming in your franchise matters, right? And George Lucas had already done that so well with LucasArts, like the late '90s to early 2000s era of LucasArts, Disney at their best will not match it. I've always known that. Like I was hyped for that Battlefront 2015 trailer, all that stuff was there and all, but it was always gonna be bigger games, a little bit more spaced out, and the hope was they're gonna be big stories and kinda have their own kinda universe to dive into. That's mostly started to happen, especially because of Respawn and their efforts there. Outlaws has been also a good step forward for open world stuff, but, video games used to be in the era that George Lucas kinda dominated all this stuff was it'd be like a film adaptation turned video game, right? Like, that's kinda how it was. Now it's like, "Oh, that one supporting character you see in this TV show or film, here's their whole storyline with their own cast of characters that you get to play as. Here's a video game out of that, or here's something set in the world of Tolkien or Star Wars or Jurassic Park and stuff like that." And that's kind of become the new game for all these studios that they're gonna have their fingers in video games and virtual reality and all these different pieces of technology, different storytelling mediums. And Lucas, again, pioneer as he is, had already done that in the early 2000s, and the gaming industry was much healthier, faster turnarounds, everything. So yeah, I think the games more recently have turned out to be pretty good. Survivor, once the bugginess kinda went away, was an excellent follow-up to Order. Outlaws is, like, a very low B tier for me, but it's still fun. It's still very immersive. I wanna see more for sure, and we need more games. It sucks that we were stuck behind that EA 10-year license deal, and now that things are opening up, hopefully that changes. But yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point about video games that they have at least here at the end of her reign become a little bit more crucial, a little bit more, beneficial to the brand and getting people excited to see Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis, right? And have him show up in the New Republic era, or maybe even be saved for later in Luke's Jedi Order era, or maybe even get aged up for Rey's new Jedi Order, right? There's a lot of different ways to look at that, and the gaming immersiveness that has come about just with fidelity, with budgets and everything, that's been great for a brand that already had a lot of success there before the late 2000s, early 2010s was a big downturn, but they had huge success with BioWare and KOTOR and all this and that. They were known for telling stories and immersive stories through video games for their franchise that didn't have to be exactly about the films or connected to the films, and everybody now is just catching up to that. So, yeah, I think Kathleen didn't have to innovate too much, but she got to refine some things, especially once that EA deal cleared up. So pretty good there. I wasn't actually the biggest fan of the Lego Star Wars game. I thought it was good, don't get me wrong, um, but I think Complete Saga and kinda, like, more of the way they can't talk, a little bit more of the simpler Lego designs. It's the nostalgia in me, I like that a little bit more. I felt like some of the choices in the game was also weird, like, you couldn't really cut limbs in cutscenes, and some of the humor was a lot more safe, right? Like, I thought for being a kid growing up in the 2000s, I'd see, like, stabs and kills, and it'd be funny, right? Uh, but they kind of avoided a lot of that stuff, even if it is fairly canonical to the games and to the movies, so that was pretty interesting, but still, it was a good success, I'm not gonna deny that. It just took a long time to get out, right? Like, it was announced, trailers come out, the FPS looks bad, it takes, like, another 2 years, and then it finally comes out, so, yeah. And then your final question here is also LEGO Star Wars specials, they've been pretty good. Rebuild the Galaxy was really fun, kinda depressing and fairly mature, but I did like it for sure. And then your last question here, Brandon, was if Lucasfilm gets new presidents to work with Disney, could they go DC route and have 2 co-heads like James Gunn in charge of films and Peter Safran, marketing producer? Yeah, I mean, maybe that is how they kind of pivot Filoni into this, right? He can be still the creative oversighter, seeing things, right? And then the producing, all the, you know, recruiting the right creatives, making Disney a little bit more welcoming to the next generation of filmmakers. Yeah, I think that could be a possibility. And it's weird because I think if Kathleen got to do, like, Solo, but under George Lucas, we wouldn't be worried at all because Lucas would probably find even weirder people and even crazier creatives to do things, right? But she did make a huge mistake. Kasdan didn't like that they were going so off script. They weren't using a lot of the sets. People were just kind of waiting around, kind of very lackadaisical approach at times, even though they started shooting their own things and then what was on paper, they're very slow paced and all that, and there was a lot of pressure from Iger, and yeah, I mean, it just didn't work out, but if you think about it, she came up with Spielberg, she came up with Coppola, we came up with Lucas, and worked underneath them, worked with them, and she got to see these guys who changed Hollywood, right? Hollywood at that point, at the beginning of the '60s was dead in so many ways, just nothing was making money, just period film, stuff like that. And when they came in, they were all the young upstarts, the ones that the studio had, but that's where all the success came from, the counterculture and everything. To kinda get that same spirit, but then be a little bit corporate mandated by Disney, by higher ups, and then still try to blend the Lucasfilm ideology and realize that you can't do that. Yeah, I mean, you can't artificially create something that is inherently almost radical, right? Like, to do things that the previous generation wouldn't have considered or might be like, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that," right? So, I think maybe with Favreau, there's a little bit more realism about how creative your people will be. Like, instead of thinking we can get a Lord and Miller, maybe you go for like the Russos, like Feige. And I think that's the talent that Feige has for sure, and why he was kind of rumored to maybe take over the president position himself at one point. Because it's about finding the people who can fit both your mandates and add their flair. And the Russos, for as great film that their films look like, as drab as they may be, as CGI background heavy as they are, they're still very competent at character relationships, dynamism and action sequences, etc. Right? So, and they started off in the most random places. Community, that old Donald Glover TV show, right? So there's nothing to say that you can't do that again, and I think Favreau has a lot of respect with the younger generation, but yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see if that DC model even has a place because we first of all haven't seen Superman. Everything's hinging on Superman. They released that like first phase plan, and now there's a recent update saying like, oh, some things are being struggled towards, like the Batman script from Andy Machete. Some things are being pushed ahead, right? Like now there's a big push for like the Starfire and Green Lantern animated shows. Some things are being rearranged even before things were happening, and I'm sure there's some shuffling and everything around phase 1 of the MCU, but there's also just a lot less content, right? Safran, as good of a producer is, the old talent that he can bring, and James Gunn's reputation as an incredible filmmaker on his own right, to handle this, and then his own ambitions of, like, "I want video games tied in too, set during the same time as everything that we're gonna see with the films." It's insane. It's really, too much to ask for, and I think they were both overly ambitious. But can that model be refined and some responsibilities be spread out, everyone kinda stay in their own unit? Yeah. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I'd be surprised if it didn't happen. Will it happen with Favreau, Filoni specifically? I don't know. I mean, they are probably the betting favorites right now, but again, we still have to hear from Lucasfilm officially, from Kathleen, when she does wanna step down and retire, and what that even means. She might still be like a pseudo studio head and just be focused on, like, 1 or 2 projects and let other people kinda be trained and be like the assistant to her. So, that's how I look at it. And your last comment here is Lego Star Wars: A Complete Saga is a cool game and should be or must will be remembered as the greatest of all time. I think it's a good game. I don't get me wrong. I liked a lot of the stuff. There was stuff that was connected to some interesting EU and canon lore, like that one like ghost droid, protocol droid on Tatooine was a pretty nice touch and all that. Like stuff like that is cool. They've definitely livened up the worlds of it. I just don't know if I loved some of the level design. I felt like they could have made the game bigger and had more DLC that instead of just character packs, had some stuff from like the TV shows and stuff that you could explore. Like that's the perfect medium to blend seeing stuff in the Clone Wars with Andor or something like that, right? So, and I might be wrong. I only really played the base game just to finish episode 1 through 9, and it took a while for me. But yeah, if you love it, you love it. Maybe I've just outgrown it. That's all it is. Okay, I think that's enough answering some questions in our chat right here. Let's move on to our second topic, and probably the one that people are actually a little bit more excited to talk about. And make sure you drop your comments in the chat. I know I'm going to be pretty verbose, especially about Andor and that trailer that just dropped. So if you really want to push something out there, want me to make sure I check it, always drop a super chat. That will get priority. And the Andor season 2 trailer dropped. I was able to quickly make a reaction to that. It's on the channel as well. But man, it's a different trailer. That song apparently is about revolutions and all that, so it fits the themes of Andor, but it's so much more pop and happy and lively. Like that for a trailer about increasing darkness leading into the spark that is A New Hope, that is Rogue One and their sacrifice there. I it was very strange, like, and I guess you can understand some elements and you can infer some things from where we left off in season 1, like, maybe Mon Mothma's at her daughter's wedding, right? The one that's partly because her daughter wants that, and she's buying into the Imperial era system that's pushing more of those Chandrilan younger marriages that Mon Mothma herself was in with Perrin. Um, so maybe they're just dancing after and celebrating, but everybody else, like, I mean, I guess they're not necessarily having the most fun, but the music choice is very interesting, and then having the different, like, blurbs and quotes from all the different Hollywood trades and everyone saying, like, "This is the best Star Wars show ever made," and all that. It just felt like a trailer, like a promo cycle from 2005, from 20 years ago, where all the spoilers were put out there, and it's just about hyping up what reputable trades and reputable film industry connections and all that. So it was a choice, especially for that to be the first trailer for Andor, but it was still really, really cool. I mean, seeing the TIE Avenger looks like that's probably the canon version of it. Cassian seems like he's gonna have that for a while. That little grassy planet looks like it could be Dantooine, could also be Lothal. There's a lot of possibilities there. Krennic is in here. Dedra looks stressed. Sierra looks stressed, but Krennic's just having a great time. Ben Mendelsohn's, he's gonna chew it up. He looks like he's gonna have fun being like the big shark in a small minnow pool, right? Like everything that we've seen in season one is has to be nothing to him, right? He's literally watching from his viewport the Death Star being finished up, right? So I do wonder if he's gonna be just be a 1 year character and all that. I don't know, but maybe he can show up for parts of like the third year or the year before Rogue One and stuff like that, or be a recurring character in this arcs. I don't know. It'll be pretty interesting. Bix is also a bigger player for sure, and she looks more a little bit more committed to the rebellion than even Cassian is. Yeah, I think there was that scene with Mon Mothma and Coruscant, like, grabbing Cassian too, outside of her typical regal senatorial affair. So, I'm think we're gonna see some really interesting character breakdowns of some sorts, and I think that fits really well with what we got just now from Mask of Fear, which again, I just put that review out this morning, so go check that out. It's an incredible book. Um, but yeah, those are my thoughts there about Andor, and before I finish it, I'll say one thing. I like the idea that this is gonna be finished off. Gilroy got what he wanted as just 2 seasons of this show. Keep it as prestige, as control to his vision as he wants. I just expected us to maybe drop 2, 3 episodes or that first arc and then do it weekly afterwards, just like Andor season 1 was. Nope, we're gonna get 4 weeks of this. And I guess maybe it's because all these episodes are gonna act as, like, basically movies covering the year. Now it makes me think that maybe it's gonna be more vignettes for some certain characters in different arcs and all that, so and others will have more of, like, the serious story pushing through here. But there's so many more characters you have to build into, like, from Rogue One and all that, and how you're gonna do that, how you're gonna service season 1 characters, some new characters. Gilroy, ironically, like we've been saying so much on this channel, has a lot of respect for continuity. So when we see the Ghost Crew, Rebels, Bad Batch influences, the books that are coming out with Mask of Fear, or sorry, the Reign of the Empire trilogy, who knows, right? I'm still excited. I'd love to see maybe the Path or something be mentioned, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like there's so much that can be pulled, but it's all to be determined, right? So, a little disappointed about how short it's gonna be, but we hope you guys are around, even if the streams are a bit later for the reviews. We might, cut them out and put them out as reviews again, like video reviews, uh, just because it might be hard for people to stay up so late and watch every single episode at that point in one night and in one sitting especially. So, yeah, those are all my complete thoughts so far, and I look forward to seeing what you guys put in the chat here. And we got a super chat from David Fielson. David, thank you very much. Good to see you back on the channel. And he said, "Can't wait for Andor season 2. I don't mind the trailer and the rock music being geared to normies to grow the audience. Show soundtrack won't be Earl." Oh, is that the name of the artist? I didn't look that part up myself. Um, yeah, I know, absolutely agreed. I mean, I just to add to that, like, we've had that Major Tom cover for the Skeleton Crew promo. Again, a much smaller show, it's more kid-oriented and all that, and the Major Tom cover was sung in Huttese, which I think was a nice way of doing it. It's like a nice bridge between what feels super popular, well-known to people, and they can recognize the instrumentation, but they might not know the words, but they're kinda saying the same words anyways. That's basically what it is. Like, I think that works a whole lot better than just this song. But then again, Andor is definitely more human-centered. That is maybe one of my biggest critiques of the show, that it is too human-centered, and I'd love to see way more alien designs just like we saw in The Acolyte, just like we started to see in Ahsoka, and hopefully we get to see, uh, build off just what the great success was in Skeleton Crew. So, yeah, I'm not worried about that either. I think it definitely covered up, which is kinda how silly and, like, shocking of a song it was for some of the darker moments, especially, like, the bombings that are happening and all the craziness of that trailer. It's a fun trailer, espionage with Cassian and high regal looks, and we didn't really get a lot about Luthen and a little bit more of the darker figures. We got Saw Gerrera kinda doing, like, his old hype man speech, but we know at some point he breaks off from Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and we know he has a falling out that's really shown in Rebels too, so are we gonna see that? Is we got the Gorman massacre, which in EU is already bad enough, but here it seems like the rumors are it might be like the No Russian scene from Modern Warfare 2 way back in the day. So, yeah, there's a lot of dark stuff being covered up by that song choice, even if it is actually quite a good fit if you actually let it sink in. It just feels too human and earth, and then all the other elements, like I said, with the gold quotes and kind of if the only thing we're really missing were, like, the TV promo, the film trailer voice guy, right, that you kinda see in, um, like, TV recaps and film recaps and trailers even until, like, 2008, 9, 10. So, that was the only thing missing, and that's why I felt very aged as a trailer to me, but the content there looks great, it looks fantastic. Excited for what comes next. Alright, Mrs. Mandarin said, "Been craving a second season of Andor for the last year. I've watched Andor 3 times, so happy to see the trailer, excited for what they have in store." Glad you love the show. I mean, I do too. I think that's probably the strongest Star Wars show for me. I think I gave it an S tier recently too. It's up there for me, and I've only seen it twice because it is 12 episodes, and they are longer episodes than everything we've gotten from Star Wars on Disney Plus, so I hope that becomes more of a norm, but everything being shot practically, how many episodes there are, that's probably not gonna happen. A nice compromise might be 10 episodes where only, like, 1 or 2 are a little bit shorter, but you get to do every genre, every thematic scope for all the different stories and eras that Star Wars is ready to jump into for live action. But Andor, at least from a production standpoint, should be compartmentalized as much as possible because you can do KOTOR really well and still have these same sort of dynamics and just happen to have a lot of Force users who are hell bent on military operations, on optics, and everything else like that. So, yeah, I love Andor just as much as you. I hope to see it pretty soon again for my third watch leading into it. I'm so behind on so many shows. I just started my Invincible rewatch for season 3, trying to catch up on the Netflix shows for Marvel before Daredevil starts. Probably gonna miss out on that too for a few weeks. It is just what it is. I hope to at least be on top of Andor because it's just 1 season. But yeah, I'm glad you like it, Miss Mandarin. And then you also said my one downside, did not like the music, but it's okay. That probably won't be in the show. Yeah, I think it looks incredible. It looks like even a step up from season 1, but it's not the right music for a typical Star Wars trailer. I mean, yeah, like, David said, maybe it's just there to get the normal people to GA that started growing more in the latter weeks, especially after the whole escape from the prison arc with, Kino Loy and everything else, and that came, what, episodes 7, 8, 9 or something? Or something around there, right? Like fairly late into the season 2, and then it started growing after the finale, right? I would not be surprised if now they're like, "Okay, hopefully you guys come back, but just in case you don't, here's, like, the most, like, bizarre sort of trailer on paper at least that will get you to talk, that'll get you excited." So, yeah, I think it's a decent choice, to get our attention, to get us talking like this, but is it one that I would have made? Probably not. Hopefully, they get a higher rating for audiences watching, and I do too. I want this to be also another step towards proper prestige Star Wars, and I think the last time that we had prestige in the streaming era was Game of Thrones. You can say Stranger Things, but they had COVID and strikes and everything take a long time for them to. But yeah, Game of Thrones still very practical in a lot of ways, but they were doing it yearly for a while before Benioff and Weiss kind of ruined it. They had the choice of handing it off to showrunners, getting 10 seasons, 10 episodes to finish the whole thing. Just didn't happen, right? So to get to a proper prestige era again would mean like maybe late 2010s AMC once Mad Men had finished, *Halt and Catch Fire* and all that. And HBO's got all that great prestige stuff, don't get me wrong, and it's just that once they got their Max brand, they kinda diluted it again, now they're kinda working their way back, etcetera, right? So, that's at least that's how I look at it. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else to add here. That's probably all I can say. Let's see. Hmm. One second here, guys. Just try to pop out the chat. Don't want to keep looking at my phone for this. Okay, and then next thing from Dave Fielson was, "I heard the time frame for 3 episodes weeks partially get the series aired in time for Emmy qualifications." Yes, I also heard that too. I believe that was a recent rule change. I think before you could do, like, first half of a season, second half, which is I think became popular when Breaking Bad's final season was coming out, um, 'cause didn't win everything for part 1, they still got nominated for it, but then obviously, I love the second half of season 5 of Breaking Bad. But it was like, okay, anything that even was a slight step down or if they wanted appreciation for those first batch of episodes, that's how they kinda did it. Doesn't seem like you can do that anymore. Um, I don't know why that was made a choice, but there's more problems with the Emmys, right? Like, as much as I love The Bear, that being put into the best comedy, category year after year and winning it, just doesn't make sense, right? And I guess there really isn't much of a cultural focus to kinda go back to gross out humor, the Judd Apatow sort of humor, um, that sort of stuff that maybe would have thrived in streaming if it had come up a bit earlier than it did. I don't know. That's how I look at it. Miss Mandarin Brandon Tran said Andor season 2 will be peak. I agree. I do think a lot of, like, the Andor snobs will be a little bit upset because there's no way you can capture that very deliberate pace and tone and buildup of Cassian and everything over 12 episodes when you know that each 3 episode block is a year and he's going to have more characters that he interacts with, more organizations, um, more dramatic things happening to the rebellion, things on Coruscant, things on Lothal, Thai adventure, heist, like everything. Like so, maybe he's the through line through all these other stories, and maybe they get kind of spread out a little bit more than they were in season 1, even. And that's how you still keep it focused and sharp and still make it so that you feel like you're still watching everything about season 1 casting continued on. But yeah, I really don't know how these years will be covered. Are they actually trying to do the proper year, or are they just gonna do 1 or 2 specific stories for the characters that if they had season 1's runtime, probably would've gone for 4 or 5 episodes as a 2 different arcs, but now they're kinda combining into, like, a mini film or like a spec it's kinda funny to say, but like the Disney Plus special presentations. So maybe. It's gonna be tough to really gauge it with what we have in the trailer because all the trailer's saying is, "Yes, you're gonna see a lot of things. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be fun." But we don't really know anything quite yet about the timeline. Let's see. Miss Mandarin said, "Not feeling the 4 weeks. Anyone with a schedule, job, family, or rich single, it's a lot to watch 3 long episodes and catch reviews. I like weekly ones that runs. It builds excitement and fun." I agree, and, I'm a proponent of batch drops, right? Like, I know The Handmaid's Tale has done that or sorry, The Handmaid's Tale has done that on Hulu and everything, so I never truly loved the Netflix model of, like, binge everything, and even they've gone away with it with Stranger Things and some of their bigger franchises. I think Cobra Kai, which I still haven't seen that final season either because 'cause I'm gonna rewatch from Karate Kid 1. They did their final season in 3 parts, it was a longer season too. And that worked there, but then they did something like that '90s show where they made season 2 a few more extra episodes than season 1, but it came a little later, not much promotion. It actually kinda killed some interest. I think these small batches work if you have a lot more episodes. 3 to capture 1 full year, if they're doing it so that the runtimes kinda drop from, like, 40 to 45 minutes to, like, 35 to 40, sure, but that's still a lot of commitment, like you said, Miss Mandarin, so we'll do it ourselves, but maybe we might have to start doing proper video reviews and cutting them up for later in the week when people actually do get to check them out and all see all the episodes for themselves. Yeah, the one episode weekly definitely helps YouTube discussions. That is one thing Liam and I talked about on his trip there, and he's like, "Yeah, it's not gonna be fun." That, we expected to have coverage for, like, 2 months, and it seemingly we won't get that. Hopefully, Celebration is big and maybe there's some surprise drops. Maybe there's more to Vision Season 3 than we expect, but I I wouldn't think so. David Fielson said, "I heard each BBY year was supposed to be seasons, so 5 seasons total, but you Luna balked at being tied up in a Star Wars production for so long, so they shortened it to 2 seasons, 1 year per 3 episode arc." I've heard some things about Diego Luna there too, but I've always heard a little bit more about, frankly, Gilroy. He kind of pulled the plug on it, and maybe they could have compromised and gone for, like, 3 seasons, but it's not like Disney was willing to keep dropping this much money into this show. Having 2 seasons, 24 episodes, that's a lot. That's 3 seasons technically compared to the other shows, and those still probably on average have shorter run times. Works out all the same. I think it's uh, a tough choice, but as long as this is the way Gilroy wanted it, good. I never expected him to be in Star Wars for this long. I never expected him to come back to Star Wars after Rogue One and what he did to really boost up a lot of the back half of or the back third of Rogue One and some of the character intros and all that. But this is the same guy who redid the whole cast and introduction and it feels the heaviest and hardest hitting for sure in Rogue One of all the character intros. So seeing this character all the way through the end, don't mind that at all. Diego Luna, I think maybe probably had some concerns because he's when he shot Rogue One was what 2014, 2015. Now it's 2025 and he shot season 2 of Andor a whole 10 years later. If he was expected to do that for 5 years and then suddenly have to look like how he does, makeup can do a lot. He's a great looking guy. He looks like he's in shape and all that. And there's some shots of him in the Avenger where he looks super gaunt like he does in Rogue One. But expect someone at his age to do that, to try to look like how they did 10 years ago and are supposed to pass off in their mid 30s when they're closer to 50. That's hard for anybody, even Hollywood. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Any other questions there? Any discussions there? Oh, Anthony Tiff said, I really like the Andor season 2 trailer. I'm really excited to see Diego Luna back as Andor. Yeah, definitely concur. Yeah, okay. I think that's all we got so far, unless you guys want to drop more for Andor specifically. Oh, okay. Miss Mandarin says, do you think we will see characters from other Star Wars shows in Andor, whether cartoon or other? I mean, we know Rogue One, obviously. Animation is gonna be a little harder. I mean, Guerrero technically jumped from Clone Wars into the end of his story. I know we got some stuff in Rebels leading into it too. And it's awesome that Forrest Whitaker's kind of just wholly taken over the character that we don't really think about that Clone Wars version. Even though he had, I think that same actor returned for the Bad Batch saga era. Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if we do get characters, they have to be elevated animation through their creatives. From animation to live action for the creatives, right? Sabine's now live action. Ezra always had potential because he's a Jedi, but and Hera and all these other characters, never expected them to be in live action. Now they are too. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we can. Like I said, Gilroy seems to have a lot of care and attention for this time period because there's a lot of things happening in the dark times, and I mean, he pulled like EU nuggets too, right? Like the little necklace that Luthen gives to Cassian. I believe it's from the Rakuten Eternal Empire, which is crazy, right? That's such a deep cut, and I'm sure Story Group had an influence on that. But that's someone who's, while not thinking about Star Wars the same way as like fanatics like us do, is approaching Star Wars the right way. That it needs to innovate, it needs to bring some new elements, it needs to be able to tell the formula in new and interesting ways. And he's definitely done that with season one, and I think he will with season two. So if he manages to still make those connections, great. And I think this is my answer to fully finishing this up, Miss Mandarin. It'll be answered by continuing to David's question. If we get the Gorman Massacre, you think we see any Rebels characters? Yeah, I mean, she basically Mon Mothma, from what we know already, like I think I don't know if it's EU or canon, but I think in EU, Tarkin just has a Star Destroyer literally land on the crowd protesting, right? And kills them all. That forces Mon Mothma to flee and like just give up any pretense of trying to work and fix the empire from within, right? To go fully into her rebel cells and all that. It seems like I said here, it's gonna be the more than no Russian with stormtroopers kind of coming out, or like someone co-opting stormtroopers, because we've seen that shot of like stormtroopers without their armor somewhat salvaged. Maybe they're the ones that kind of start this whole barn fire of craziness happening there. But she'll have to escape. She'll be not just a political enemy, but she'll probably be a witness too, right? Like, okay, like you're so tied into this. She mentions it in season one, like about the Gorman people and everything with Palpatine's doing to them, and then sees all this happen. She's got to flee, and it leads us directly, I believe, into where she is in Rebels when she lands and and connects her ship through space dock to the Ghost, right? So maybe we see casting on the other end there, or maybe there's rumors that maybe it's Saw Gerrera that saves her because he is kind of being pushed into this. Um, man, what's the guy's name? Garm Iblis, or I don't know how the Corellian sort of general guy from EU. Maybe now he's kind of filling that role, but obviously being a lot more anarchist and radical as a whole. But Mask of Fear is definitely positing him as like one of the first influential leaders alongside Bail Organa and Mon Mothma for the rebellion. So yeah, I think maybe there's a chance for animation. I think he'd handle it well, but maybe we don't like part of someone's face or like hear someone's voice or something like that. Bail, Leia, Vader, will it take away from the seriousness of the show if we get big name cameos? We need Bail Organa. I don't know what we're doing not getting Jimmy Smits. Like, Obi-Wan Kenobi's nice to see him return there. Don't get me wrong, and I love seeing him in Rogue One. But what we know from Mask of Fear is that him and Mon Mothma do not see eye to eye about everything, even if they are aligned on the same goals. In the EU, he would kind of be playing that sort of turncoat Imperial where people would like snitch to him, and then he'd protect those people because he'd snitch. He's like he was a double agent, right? He would protect all of these rebel cells and leaders and all that. So he needs that writing of Andor for sure. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a personal story. No matter who wrote that, it was going to be personal about Padme's daughter, his daughter, and Leia, right? So yeah, he needs to be there. I need to see some interesting things there. I need to see his interactions with Saw in live action, and I need to see his interactions with Bail Organa and maybe some other representatives of Phoenix Cell and everything. Leia, I don't know. I think Rebels cameo is more than enough, and I don't think that was super necessary. Vader, there is some rumor that Vader might appear. Maybe we get to see if that field of grain is actually Lothal. Maybe he's gonna show up during season 2 of Rebels, and we get to see him. I don't know. There's a chance. Uh, will it take away from the seriousness of the show if we get big name cameos? I don't think so. It all comes down to writing, 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 writing. That is the name of the game. That's what Andor grew its audience from. I don't think the characters as notable as they were, like, continuing from Rogue One, and the big name actors as they were, like Skarsgård. That was not enough for people to be like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna check out the show." People were fully into the whole Mandalorian fever at that point. Book of Boba Fett was disappointing for a lot of people, sure, but they were still like, "Yeah, okay, whatever, we'll figure that out later. We'll get a season 2 and make do." Andor was the show that people were like, "Why are we doing this? Like, we already know he's gonna die." And it's turned out to be great. So, I think you can do big names. It's just you have to have the right creative, the right team, and maybe a little less studio corporate influence changing and affecting how the writing is done to appeal to just general audiences. General audiences will come and they'll stay when the diehards like us kind of say some great things or translate it for them. Like, this is why you should watch it. This is like watching The Last of Us on HBO. This is prestige stuff. Like, that's there are ways to sell Star Wars that are not traditionally the ways that we sell Star Wars, right, to our friends and our families. So that's how I look at it. Mrs. Mandarin says, I still want to learn how Luthen became who he is. What is in his past? How did Luthen have the connections? Great question. Honestly, it might be that he was probably a curator at some point. Maybe not necessarily of all these antiquities, but maybe he was part of Republic secret police or something like that under Palpatine that was hidden away from politicians and the Jedi who are like the treasure hunters of Nazi Germany, right? When they first started like pushing the party into power, then, right? Maybe it's something like that. We already know that there's like not Sith, sorry, Jedi operatives like Boda Kuna who kind of work as like Jedi intelligence, Jedi secret police, kind of darker, murkier events, and a little less edgy traditionally Jedi stuff like Quinlan Voss and Anakin, right? So possible, yeah. To find out about his origins, will we? I don't know. I think that some of the appeal is to know that we won't ever like that whole monologue about like I won't be able to even see what I'm sacrificing everything for. Like, yeah, I think that's the whole point, right? he is gonna be forgotten. He is maybe getting dismissed in the same way Guerrero is, if not even more so. Or maybe he's does the self-sacrificial play for Mon Mothma, for all these other rebels to have a chance because the way he's rebelling isn't helpful enough, or it's actually causing more harm than good. So, kind of dealing with him as he is now, I think matters more. But would we get some nice little hints, connections, maybe some family or someone else? Yeah, why not? Why not? David says, "You think they show Kino Loy, how whether he survived, or is the lack of resolution part of the story?" Like I said, I think Andor likes to play with the realism, so lack of resolution is a very real thing that happens. But there has been a lot of rumors that Kino Loy has survived, so maybe he did jump in the water and manage to swim. It was fight or flight, or and you know, or I guess not in the sense fight or flight. It was swim or drown, right? And he swam. He forced himself to doggy paddle to the shore or something. But maybe he survives. Maybe we get to see him on Coruscant or something. I'd love to see Andor's influence on him, and if he's gonna go into the rebellion or if he's gonna do something else, right? Because he's a good leader. We've seen that. And he just happened to be like the house servant for so long before he realized that there's nothing that he'll get out of this too by following every rule. The rules were meant to be broken. And then Miss Mandarin says, I know Tony doesn't like Jedi, but I feel like some aspect of the Force needs to be behind helping the rebellion. I was hoping to see someone in the background doing things Rebels can't see. I mean, we do have that, right? We do have Fulcrum with Ahsoka and everything. Why not, right? Like, why not keep it to some other mediums? We don't need to have the Jedi to come into the story unless we see Vader and him, like, killing some upstart Jedi that kinda starts him to enter the Lothal Jedi storytelling, that kicks off season 2 of Rebels. Maybe he's been on a little bit of a rampage recently, and then the Grand Inquisitor gives him some hints, calls him in. I'd love to see the Grand Inquisitor just redone. I don't mind that his face is a little bit more rounder. I just think that you need to get the striations and everything if you're gonna have him show up again. And then Mrs. Manderson predictions who will die season 2, and David said Bix, Luthen, Dedra, Serial instead of Cyril. I hope that's some nice little innuendo because of his mom and the apartment there. Um, yeah, I think those are all good possibilities. But I think the most interesting thing that the show can do is actually play with our expectations and actually make a lot of them survive. It's more interesting to see how these characters lose their power, lose their influence, and essentially are dead in the Star Wars galaxy, but they're still around and kicking, and maybe they pop up again in the early New Republic era when lawlessness is coming about because the government's just now trying to take over the empire, and we get to see that be a little bit more of the complexities, the shades of gray that Mandalorian season 3's episode 3 was trying to explore, but didn't necessarily with kind of these re-education camps and everything. And I like that episode a lot. It just didn't have the same I was trying to do some own mini Andor there, just didn't have the maturity to handle it at that point. So, yeah, I think we can see that for sure. Yeah, but I think, Bix could live past Cassian. I think it would be kinda nice, for them to fully set aside their relationship, and then for her to continue with the rebellion, especially post the traumatic stuff that happened at the end of, the Ferrex arc there, to end season 1. Luthen, I think, has to die. He's too influential as a power broker for him to not be around, I think. And I'm sure he would add complexions to the very fragile relationship between Mon, Saw, and Bale, right? So he kind of works with everybody. I'd like to see what he does for Bale, or if Bale shuns him entirely or something. But it would be pretty cool to see where he stands and if separating himself ultimately helps the idealist kind of actually take a real foothold and push and actually have success for the rebellion instead of the maddeningly dark, depressing hole that he always will be in, right? So that's how I look at it. Dedra, she could die. I think if it dies, it should be like in some sort of dark, twisted relationship with Cyril. That's he's been chasing her like a crazed, in love lapdog. I'd love to see a very toxic relationship between them, and especially since he's not officially ISB, what he's gonna do for as like a third party consultant, kind of right. So I think Cyril could definitely die. I'd love to see Dedra survive, and but if she does die, I'd like to see maybe more career suicide, and that's mostly through some of her choices with Cyril, or if she does something that throws Krennic off his game. And I wanna see Krennic be awesome in the series because if you read Krennic in, like, Lost Stars, if you read him in Thrawn, when he's just known as, like, the director, yes, I know he plays off a little bit more of the working man, pulled himself up the boot sort of Imperial and not the classic British super rich classist villain. Um, but he was still terrifying in those books because he was just better than everybody else. He's capable so much compared to everybody else. So I hope we do that here too, and that he makes Dedra look like she's nothing. Do we get another reference to Andor's sister, or is that a dead end? I think we'll get that resolved in some way. It'd be pretty interesting if we actually meet the sister finally, and then Cassian kind of gets into the scene where he's introduced in Rogue One, and he's kind of led astray, not astray, but led into decisions that will take him to his death, but will benefit the rebellion as a whole. Uh, So yeah, I think that'll be handled. I don't know how it'll be handled, if it'll be resolved, I don't know, but I think we'll maybe actually get to see the sister or proof of her death. Mrs. Mandarin said, "Yeah, I guess some die, but could live and stay part of the rebels, but their story is untold in the original trilogy." And I mean, not everything has should be told in the original trilogy. Like, relatively speaking, it is like the smallest, most contained trilogy. Like the battles are ginormous, but you're only with like 20 rebels max throughout those 3 films. Resistance is a lot more out there and shown and more interaction between our big players and cameo characters and occasionally recurring characters than the Rebellion, right? The characters that could have been like a Biggs Darklight or something, oftentimes were killed off. Your best example is Wedge, and Wedge became such a huge player in the EU because of that, because he's there at both Death Star battles and everything like that, and he's in all these battles, but you don't really see what he does in the battles, just know that he survives. So, um, yeah, I think you're gonna see a lot more of these characters shape their lives, shape the Imperial rule in the waning years before everything kinda goes wrong. Yeah, it'll be pretty interesting. Uh, the new friend is the other K2SO. I'm assuming that's what you're saying in reference to what David was saying, Mrs. Mandarin, about B2EMO. I think B2 is gonna have retcon into K2SO and his personality matrix, because I don't think they're gonna try to completely undo that one-shot comic about his origin there, but maybe B2 gets destroyed or gets damaged, finally wears down, and then Cassian takes that memory matrix, puts it into a K2 machine, and that's how he, like, hacks it essentially and remakes it into the K2SO that is powerful, is a very deadly weapon in Rogue One, but is also kinda silly. Will backslap or backhand his own master and Cassian, or not even master, he's kinda more on the level ground with the guy, but yeah. Alright, I'm gonna take a couple more questions here before I jump into some of these other story, news questions here, guys, so hold off your thoughts for a little bit and throw more questions related to the other topics, and then I'll get back to them. But I'll do these last 2 here from David and Miss Mandarin. You think we visit Jeddah? They must sure explain how Saw ends up there. I don't know. That's an interesting thought because we know that we're seeing Dakar, the resistance base from Force Awakens. In the trailer, we get to see some old separatist ship being reused as like a carrier, some of the partisan X-wings. What they do to go so wrong with everybody else, I don't know, but maybe we get to see him at least say we're going to go to Jeddah, or maybe he's always been at Jeddah as like a rotating base. I think the more interesting question is how did he get Borgalit there, right? I don't think that's a alien that's native to that planet in any ways. So, yeah, maybe we do visit Jeddah, and if we do visit Jeddah, I don't know if it'll necessarily be through Cassian or Saw or somebody else. If we do see it, I probably will be Saw setting up what he considers his final stop, right? Like that's how I view it. And then will the season be as sad as Rogue One and how Saw got his scars? I don't know if we'll see ever. Just assume that his body's just breaking down through war, through implants, through poor choices, through celebrations. Who knows? And will this season be as sad as Rogue One? I think so. It's a bit of a controversial opinion, but I don't think Rogue One is all that. I love the back third, especially. That's incredible, and the back half is pretty dang solid, especially once, you get to see Krennic kind of bring out and I'm blanking on her name, Felicity Jones's character, Jyn Erso. Once you get to see the Ursas reunite and all that, yeah, I think that's when we get to see some of the sadness really shine in that film. I think there's plenty of sadness already in Andor. Will it be more? Probably, but I think there's also going to be some nice, fun genre twists. So we get to see some thrillers. We're going to see some comedies, a little mix of everything. Yeah, I think we're gonna hold off on questions for this Andor topic here. I want to get into that last big story. But feel free to keep sending in the chat. I will get to it. Try to keep the stream a little bit under 2 hours. Again, it's just me. Liam's not back. I don't think until next week. So we'll be back on our regular Tuesday schedule and all that. So if I don't get to every question, send it then or reply in the replay of this chat. Make sure to spread and share it around, of course. But yeah, let's go to that third story. And that third story is about none other than Revenge of the Sith getting its official confirmation for its 20th anniversary in the week of April, at least 1 week of showings. And Liam and I already saw it, and for the May the 4th marathon last year, it was an awesome experience. We did RPX because it was around the middle of the night and nobody was there. So that's the best screen I've seen that film on, and RPX is comparable to like a low grade IMAX, low grade Dolby Cinema. Um, not bad in any means, but yeah, that's just what it is. But yeah, I think, it's gonna be exciting to see that Matt Ferguson came back again to do the poster. I love his work there. Still love his Empire post the best. I think there's more variety, actually, ironically, in the Return of the Jedi poster compared to the Revenge of the Sith one. The Phantom Menace one is great, though. I think it's Empire Strike Back, Phantom Menace. Revenge of the Sith, I feel like you're missing Palpatine, Yoda, Qui-Gon more deliberate sorry, not Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan more deliberately. And especially you're missing Padme. You can get the whole Battle of Coruscant and everything, even in the widescreen one, but it's good. Don't get me wrong. I loved his art, but it's a great re-release art. That's how I look at it. So I'm excited for that. And a nice little tidbit of news for you guys. It's gonna be in premium formats like IMAX and all that. That's awesome. Want to see the full 4K film restoration, not the streaming version that we get on Disney Plus. And we know that even though 2 and 3 were shot digitally and all their graphics were kinda encoded in 720p digital, they were able to make it look a little bit better with, like, a little bit of an overlay. You basically have to redo the entire graphics if you want to, make those films upgraded versus film where it's technically infinite how much data can be held, right? So those older films can always continue looking better and better and better, even if the filmmaking techniques become more obvious. Um, that's just how it is. But yeah, premium formats are coming. I think that's a great way to see the film. I can recommend it, having seen it in RPX. But there's going to be 40x as well. So if you've never seen like Twisters or Gran Turismo or anything, can you imagine Youngling Slayer 9000? No, just kidding. But like Mustafar, that fight and the heat and everything from that, the space battle, Battle of Coruscant, just all the insane action. Like just even like for example, the bike chase and the lizard chase by Obi-Wan on Utapau for Grievous and all that. It's gonna be unreal. I know I'm gonna see it in 40x. I've seen it in theaters now twice, right? Back in 2005, back in 2024. I think next for me is 40x. I just want to experience this in a very different way because it's only been, I want to say 9 months since I saw uh, Revenge of the Sith in a really good premium format. So that's where it stands. But yeah, what do you guys think about the news that it's going to be getting its run in April? What do you guys think about Matt Ferguson's art? Do you think that we'll be getting a run for like maybe the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens as well? Or do Ferguson be contracted for that, or is it still the nostalgia hasn't fully kicked in for the sequels yet? It's only starting to with The Force Awakens especially. Let me know your thoughts if you guys are planning on seeing it. Um, yeah, no, it'll be awesome to talk about it. And once we get the Discord and everything up and running, I hope to be able to have a space for people to share their photos of going to all these screenings, maybe even seeing each other, meeting up with each other from Star Wars Labs or Celebration and whatever else. And I can't wait to see, especially Celebration, what they're doing with the Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens. It's gonna be a great time. Yeah, that's really the big story there. Kinda all my thoughts on that. Doesn't seem like you guys have much there. So okay, Fieldston said, "I'm gonna be definitely seeing it in theaters." I mean, of course, right? Like, gotta see it in a even better version than in '05, right, now that it's been upscaled and restored to the best of its ability, and I hope that they do figure out new AI-based technology if it has to be that, despite my resistance to AI in film, using, like, a generative AI or something to recreate the effects or making more sophisticated overlays of the stuff that was already encoded back in, 2001, 2002, 3, 4 when they were making Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, absolutely. Mrs. Mandarin says, "I would watch Revenge of the Sith in theaters." Of course, it's got a lot of nostalgia for it. Gen Z, like me, absolutely loves it. It is where the prequel love first began, and Clone Wars rode its coattails and then elevated again and again and again. Oh, you said you're gonna watch it again? Of course, yeah. I mean, I might even see it twice. Let's be real, especially if there's multiple friends groups that want to watch it. I'll be doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be awesome. I can see why it's in April. Maybe they're trying to build off the celebration hype and everything. But yeah. And then Fielson said, I haven't seen specific times or dates yet for tickets, but can't wait. Yeah, nothing has come out yet. Don't worry. I think that'll be more in March. And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be extended. There's just way too much of an upswell of people. And with how successful the Phantom Menaces was, like, why wouldn't we, right? It's a little sad that we're having I mean, has Attack of the Clones returned to theaters yet? No. No, right? I guess we'll wait till the 25th for Attack of the Clones. What is that gonna be? 2030, 2027, right? Okay, you guys should be able to hear me now. Something happened to uh, this causes a big mess. But yeah, yeah, uh, definitely excited just like everyone else is here. I think I saw something from Mrs. Mandarin. Um, my original nostalgia is A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi. Yeah. And Fielson said, "I was 4 seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters, first movie I ever saw in theaters." That's awesome. I don't think I don't know. I mean, I feel like my dad said something at one point that I saw Phantom Menace when I was a baby, like a year old. Maybe that's why I have, like, a lot of love for the pod racing and everything for that. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Like seeing you guys be older fans who still have a lot of love for the prequels and are gonna watch it, especially for the best prequel out there. I know people say episode one, and I think maybe as world building as a purely unadulterated George Lucas film, yes. But as a proper prequel film, I think Revenge of the Sith takes the cake for sure. Even though arguably the strongest thematic stuff does happen in two. Yeah, and Fielson agrees. Episode three is the best prequel. It is just the best, most well executed. Right? It's still messy in some ways. Like some of the romance stuff improved, but still not great. Like it's just how it is. There were still some sins to letting Lucas kind of be in charge of all the dialogue and letting him just work on shooting scripts instead of like finalized scripts, like just days before being on set. But that's how the prequels were. A lot of his friends were like, "We can't deal with the machine that is Star Wars and the craziness that comes with it." So yeah. Palp lightsaber fight could be upgraded. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of misinformation to that. Like, there's some stories saying like he had the stuntman, and then day of, Lucas is like, I want to see you, Ian get to do all his facial expressions and all that, and do that between like two older statesmen. But like Samuel L. Jackson was in great shape. It was in his early 50s, I think, at that point, late 40s to start off the prequels. Ian was closer to his late 50s, I think, and was never as athletic, it seems like. Um, yeah, but yeah, that fight has a lot of like that CGI mask for that you can see also on Dooku in his fights before like deep faking was ever a thing. But yeah, I think that was more of that. I think it's because it just with the red carpets, with the skyline, it might have just been hard to make a lot of like far away shots look good when you've got all the CGI and everything they also account for. Um, and it was a little easier for Attack of the Clones and on the Invisible Hand, which is just a lot of metal sheets. Yeah, so that's probably why, but I agree, it should've been better. I wish there's some stuff that you can see from, like, the deleted stuff that makes it a little bit more athletic, a little bit more terrifying, makes some of the first masters die a little less quickly, so yeah. Mrs. Mandarin says, "I was too young to see it in theaters, but my first watch was on the old HBO when it was cable and on VHS tapes my parents and uncles had." Yeah, I mean, for a long time for me too, because, yeah, I had Blockbuster and everything growing up. So I grew up on the 2004 releases, and the special editions of those, which were already special editions on top of the 97 ones. But when I watched those and then I watched some of the VHS stuff at the library and all that, I actually saw all the stuff where you can see Luke's very interestingly darker green lightsaber. I always kind of love that for Luke more than just the traditional green. I kinda wish that they could keep that look. I hope they make that a lightsaber color again. It worked great for me, but I guess that was just some film scan error that they just didn't correct. And they were kinda sloppy about it in '97, 2000, on in the '97 release, and then they kinda fixed in 2004, and then by 2011, it was completely gone, with its own problems, of course. Uh David says, Clone Wars Season 5, Episode 16, Paul versus Maul and Savage made the live action lightsaber tool look cheesy. I mean, that's animation for you, right? Especially when they're a lot more mannequin-esque, you could kind of quite literally see their limbs be stiff moving and all this and that, right? The flow, the mocap that they use in season 7 of with Ahsoka versus Maul on Mandalore is probably the perfect balance of some stuff being animated by animators, some stuff being the actual mocap actors. Ray Park also coming back, bringing his physicality to the character was a great choice, especially since he could more realistically play that older age Maul with missing half his body with cybernetics and all that. That was really cool for me. And I agree that is an incredible duel. That's probably one of the best duels in all of the Clone Wars. It's just also very unrealistic. Like it's some of the angles, the way they crouch and all that. Like I get the force is the force. Um, I actually like that fight, Paul versus Bond, brother. Yeah, it's a great fight, especially when you got Maul just slammed in the ground so many times after he sees his brother die in his hands, and Savage is revealed to be more Night Sister magic than actually like a physical brute, right? That it's all a facade, like almost like imposter syndrome the whole time. And then Maul tries to do his double lightsaber dark eye style, and then just absolutely gets just thrown around like a rag doll, starts crying. Yeah. If anything, I would love to see, and if I don't know if you 2 have read it, but the Son of Dathomir comics has some great stuff with Grievous, Talzin, Dooku, Maul, obviously, yeah, just that stuff should be animated at some point. I'd love for that and the Crystal Crisis arc, and obviously Dark Disciple to become, like, special presentations or, like, mini arcs for continuing, uh, the Clone Wars in some way. Like, if they do, like, a animated Path show where now that we have, Quinlan confirmed still alive in Kenobi, and obviously with Asajj back, if they start doing flashbacks to at least show some parts of Dark Disciple. I do like that they made it a little bit more mature from those 8 episode scripts, with the medium, but yeah. Uh, David says episode C30 when Anakin decapitating Dooku set the tone for the get-go. Yeah, definitely. Miss Mandarin says, "Actually like that fight, Paul." I already read that. My best memorable fight was Luke versus Vader at Return of the Jedi because of the emotional moments. I love the emotions of the fight. I just think it's super sloppy. You can see in the kind of blue black computer displays under the bridge after Vader throws his lightsaber and kind of breaks it down that he actually has Luke's lightsaber or someone else's lightsaber with him. So, uh, yeah, it's a weird choice, honestly. It seems like that whole thing was different. At one point, he gets Luke's lightsaber, and then Luke gets it back. I think Luke's or Hamill's footwork ain't bad when he, like, kinda, like, rages out there. It's just that it's such wild swings, and then you can almost see how Vader, Prowse or Anderson, whoever was in the suit, kinda telegraphs and falls to the ground, like, "Okay, now I'm supposed to fall," kinda like stage fighting at that point. Because for me, my favorite fight of all time, still to this day, is Empire Strikes Back because, yes, it's thematically old there too, but you know that it's Vader fooling around, right? And it's just so controlled, and then when he gets rage filled and all that, it's like you can't handle that assault, right? I really love that. I really love the ambiance and how it changes, the environment changes. Throw Luke off the game to show tactics matter in lightsaber fights. I don't really think Return of the Jedi has much tactical semblance to it, even though I love that when they cut back to that fight and you get to see like the weight of the lightsaber doing in the kick. I love that. I think it starts really great once they come back from everything on Endor and the space battles. I just don't like how it ends, and then the emotions kick in, you're like, "Ah, it's awesome." But, yeah, I don't love how it looks, especially because 5 had been such a massive improvement over Episode 4's lightsaber duel. David Fieldson also says, "Dark Disciple, one of my faves, Ventress, one of my favorite characters." Agreed, agreed. She's fairly bland in The Bad Batch. It was a weird backdoor pilot and nothing interesting or new to her character. It was a bit of like a sort of like quasi saying, yes, Omega doesn't have the force that way, but there are things you could do possibly that could amplify successful projects like Strandcast, like Snoke in the future. Just was never pushed as hard as it could have been. Miss Mandarin says, yeah, it's not technically perfect, but back in the 80s, it's oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it wasn't it and still is great to watch. I do enjoy, like I said, that first half of the fight, the way that Vader flies off and gets kicked. I do think it starts off very much as, like, another half step from where they leave off in Empire Strikes Back. My problem is just that they clearly changed how the middle part of the fight goes, and they probably had more of it, and then the end, because you could see the lightsaber on Vader's belt while he's fighting. And again, Hamill, he's pretty good, don't get me wrong, but I think he just wasn't as good as he was in Empire Strikes Back with a lot of his like handiwork. His footwork was fine. David Fielson's quoting, "You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, just like my father before me." Throw saber to the ground. Best moment of oh yeah, no, again, all that stuff is incredible acting. And again, Hamill is so good in 5, and he still has incredible scenes in 6. It's just the I don't love that there feels like Marquand and George Lucas has to be, uh, or I guess, like, the 2nd team director just wasn't we're on their game the way Urban Kershner was, who and he was a notorious perfectionist. Like, that whole sequence where Vader snaps his head as he's walking with, carbonite frozen Han Solo and sees Luke and hears R2, right? And then he shoots at the wall. Like, he apparently shot that so many times. Not to the same intensity as, like, a Fincher where he, like, almost breaks his actors, but, like, he did it so well. That film looks incredibly gorgeous. Like, the thing that they did there in that film was to actually make Cloud City feel like it's in the clouds, right? Like, that's that's the only thing they really needed to do there, and fixing the bad woman with the monkey or pig eyes on her face that was the original Palpatine, and I don't love the Ian McDiarmid Palpatine they went with. I don't think they did it super well, but it's still better than, um, the original version by far. And David, continuing on with his last point, Luke puts his faith entirely into Vader's hands, trusting Anakin will yeah, you're not wrong at all. Um, I grew up watching the version where he doesn't say anything, and then he picks up Palpatine, throws him down the shaft. And then I've obviously seen the version now probably more times of him saying, "No, no, no," and then throws down Palpatine, right? I actually like both. It fits well with the Hayden kinda coming out, and especially since we do see Hayden as the Force Ghost. I know Liam is a little bit more of a fan of Sebastian Shaw, but I'm honestly not. You can't really tell how Sebastian Shaw looks like. I don't think most kids knew what he looked like in the '80s. So it was like, "Oh, who's this other middle-aged guy next to Kenobi?" seeing Hayden always kind of worked for me. Um, and it's cheesier. I agree. I do, but I still think it works to wrap it up for that original 6. Could it be have done better? Could have just been one single no? Yeah, and it would have been fine for me, honestly. The silence is still good. I think they could have found a balance, but I think I'm okay also with leaving it as is because let's not McClunky this. And I love McClunky unironically now, but that's just because the whole scene with Han shooting first has just been made such a mess over the years by Lucas. And to that point, Miss Mandarin says, "I don't like Lucas change things in his own movies. If you compare with the latest digital, it's not the same." It's not. It's not. And, he refuses to give it over to, uh, the Library of Congress too for preservation, right? So, yeah, I get that. I do. But I also do agree with him that he never really got to make the trilogy that he wanted. The one film that he probably got exactly how he wanted was Empire Strikes Back, and he left a lot of that up in Kershner's hands, right? He left that a lot of it up in brackets, and you can see that. I got the poster right behind me. Um, but then when he was kind of forced to change plans from 6 films to 3 films and introduce Leia as Luke's sister instead of being introduced in, like, episode 7 or 8. Yeah, yeah, I mean, things definitely changed. He had his divorce going on. Marquand was not really ready for that. Lynch at one point was recruited, and then he said no. Probably for the best, honestly. I love the guy, but rest in peace, but he's been too crazy, too weird. Although he probably would have nailed more of the original ending of Luke where he like wanders off into the desert, kind of like alone, not defeated, but on a much harsher, darker path than everybody assumed, instead of the joyful ending that Return offers. Um, but yeah, no, I agree, Miss Mandarin. I don't love the changes, most of them, but I'm fine with a creative having control over what they did. Right? I think that's the best way to look at it. If I had the chance to go back to some old student films I did, and I had footage that didn't turn out right, but I could maybe clean it up or use some AI camera work and focus on a specific thing there, and then I can replace footage and add it in, I would do that. David says Hayden Force Ghost makes more sense. Last time he embraced the light side. Yeah, especially. I just wish he actually wore the robes. You can very clearly tell that he's robed over Sebastian Shaw's head, but it's whatever. That's fine. All right. I'm gonna pause on the comments here a little bit. And remember, if you want to make sure for the next 15, 20 minutes that are left in the stream to get your comments in here, send a super chat. That's the best way to do it. I had a couple other smaller stories here that I want to talk about. We'll get into the next one here, which was originally on the thumbnail, which is we got our first preview of the Greg Pak Star Wars 2020 line, which is set after Battle of Jakku maxi series and after Return of the Jedi, right? Uh, I love Phil Noto's art. It always looks incredible. I've heard the criticism that he draws faces incredibly well, but he also does very static shots. And I never really noticed that before, but I can see that point of but I like that we're starting to see this era be fleshed out, unused sequel concepts, Mando concepts, like some of the Stormtrooper armor that's shown. Seeing Luke in his whole, Mindor kind of outfit again, wearing the jumpsuit, the X-Men jumpsuit on big missions is pretty cool too. I love that they're referencing a lot more about how the actors actually look like in their lives instead of every Bantam novel and every even New Jedi Order novel making them look like a couple gray hairs more and a couple wrinkles, but still looking like they're 25, 30, right? I liked a lot of what was there shown in the preview. Obviously, there's no text, but I thought that was pretty cool. And you guys know that I was very hyped for Battle of Jakku. First arc was pretty good. Second arc was like Crimson Rain. Like, what are we doing here? Just a lot of setup. And then third arc, a lot of weird canonical inconsistencies that don't line up with Aftermath. The way to look at that series now is that on its own, it's probably good. And, Adelhard is definitely fleshed out, but it doesn't make the connections to Aftermath, to Uprising, to be the connected glue like as expected. And the way that they kind of have to jump and rush through stories with different artists, different writers, they probably, you know, I mean, I don't know. They could have made it 25 issues. I think they could have taken their time, and they could have still done the same release schedule, honestly, or just make it 3 weeks gaps instead of weekly, and then 2 weeks between each arc. I don't know. I found that to be a bit of a big failure, and actually, sorry, it's not Greg Pak. Greg Pak did Vader. I believe it's Tom Segura who did Battle of Jakku, who's now taking over. So I do have some trepidation with some of the inconsistencies there, but I'm hoping that eventually he hears that feedback, the response. He quasi kind of says like, "Oh, hold the storytelling around Battle of Jakku's more myths and fables and not all one clean narrative." That's fine and all, but like I'd hope that those kind of evil setup characters that he put at the very end of the series are the ones who are recounting the story incorrectly, and then Luke or someone else refutes some details or clarifies some things to line it up. Like Sloane, this is a slight spoiler, should not be working with Rex, and even if she is, it should be a little bit more obvious that she's pretending to be in contact when she's actually chasing and hunting him down. But, we'll see how that gets corrected. And then, there were some rumors about Quantic Dream. Um, I believe Quantic Dream with NetEase, they've laid off a lot of their staff. If you've heard of that name, it's probably because of Marvel Rivals, which has been hugely, hugely successful. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's a bummer to see that they seem like they're divesting from a lot of their studios and gaming studios, and there's so many cuts coming to gaming in general, just not healthy at all right now. A lot of people are leaving AAA for AA games and indie games. Um, that being said it seems like it's been refuted a little bit that Quantic apparently will be fine, which is also a bit of a negative because, they had that Eclipse trailer, what, 3 years ago now? And we found out that it was just kinda like a test presentation just because to showcase what they wanted. None of it is anywhere close to what they're actually working on, which is frustrating because I wanted to see a lot of High Republic storytelling be told through that, which was kind of that implication of the whole trailer. Yeah, so, disappointing, and then David Miscage, he's a mess as a person. He's done some very misogynistic things and all that, and I think he had, like, pictures of young girls like, Elliot Page, for, like, the character in Heavy Rain or something, I don't know, just some really weird things. Terrible company culture. Detroit Human was a great success, but yeah, I don't know. They're good games, but they're not great enough to even in any way tolerate even like a fraction of that. So I never expect Eclipse to come out at this point. I have way more faith in the KOTOR remake, uh, and I don't want him around Star Wars. Honestly, if shouldn't really let really messed up people be in that position, right? But yeah, I hope eventually we do get a High Republic game. Like there's rumors that we'll get another MMO soon to once they start proper like I think they've already moved BioWare off of Star Wars: The Old Republic, moved it to another team. So we're in the end stages of Star Wars: The Old Republic. But I'm looking forward to like a canon MMO closer to Galaxies, but with the storytelling elements that definitely did work in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and then have it be set in the High Republic era or something. That'd be a great way to have connections to the book stories and have all those events kind of play in like quick time events or some specific like boss missions and all that, and still allowing you to have original story and then get to do things like raise your own moisture farm like in Galaxies and all that. Let me check if there's any other news here, guys. But otherwise, I'll probably just jump back into the chat. Just send in whatever you have here. Um, yeah, let me check. Yeah, but it's been a pretty good week for news, honestly, for Star Wars. It's in the sense that there's a lot of stuff to chew on, right? All right. Let me check here. Uh, Jeff Snyder adding to the Kathleen Kennedy says that, like, yeah, she'll remain uh, a producer on a handful of films. Filoni's the favorite, but no one believes he should do it alone. Favreau and Kevin Feige aren't interested. Ram Bergman, who is the producer, I believe, for a lot of Ryan Johnson's films, has been described as the most qualified for the job. Yeah, honestly, I would like him to be like the Saffron to whoever the creative head is, right? Um, let's not saddle Filoni with even more responsibilities. Like, either make him fully responsible for all the overall creative direction and keep his hands away from other stories and contradictions, ironically, or make him fully creative again, right? Like, don't if he's gonna be CCO, make him be CCO and focus on sending off Ahsoka the right way. And then continuing on Andor, it looks like there's some new actors that are gonna be joining. Amar Duffus, Robert Ems, Mark Rissman from Overlord, The Last Kingdom, 1893. Yeah, I mean, like I said, Andor seems like they're gonna get a lot of new characters. So with the reputation that it's garnered, I'm sure they're picking up a lot of some hotshot actors from other great miniseries and uh, just recently concluded shows. All right, jumping back in the chat here, David Fielson says, "When's the third Cal Kestis game coming out? When does he show up in live action?" Hmm. Tough question. Tough question. I know that the director for the game director for Fallen Order and Survivor has left Respawn, so it's gonna be a new person. I know they started hiring for some of the positions. I'm not super worried about Jedi 3. I think it'll be a good send off for Cal Kestis' main story for sure. Uh, I hope he survives because I'd like to see Cameron get to actually play the character. I'd love to see him and Amonis Fondi, Ezra and Cal, Night Sister stuff. I forget. Let me look up what her name is. But I'd love for Marin's mocap actress to come too. Um, Tina Ivlev, or yeah, I'd love for her to play Marin. I'd love to see if they have children that are like half Night Sister, half Jedi. I'd love to see him do some Night Sister things too in the game. A huge thing I really wanted in game 2 was to be able to play as Marin for a part of the game. Kinda got that through Seer, but that's still very similar. I wanna see more interesting force powers and cultures and abilities put to use, and I'd like to see Marin teach Cal and be a playable character. Um, but to your point about you're worried you won't appear in live action until after 3rd game drops, it's a long way off. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think you can't overdo the New Republic era that is the first 10 years, right? We've already got Luke. They're still figuring out if they're gonna continue deepfaking him or they're gonna actually go for proper recast. Um, that's its own big thing, a big bubble to burst there, especially with, like, AI being frowned upon a lot more in the film industry, but still a lot of creatives like James Cameron, who was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a whole title card saying no AI was used in making this film," but he's invested in AI film companies now. I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, adding him to Luke and then Iman Fondi coming back and being pitch perfect as Taylor Gray's Ezra, but older. That's great and all. Ahsoka might not come back, but Sabine probably comes back. Ahsoka might ascend to godhood or something on Peridia. But if she doesn't and she's in the conflicts, so that's 3, 4 Force users. Where's the space for Cal at that point? Not a lot, especially since at least with Jorus Sabayoth and Luuk, right? You had powerful Force users. Knights the Great Mothers are powerful. They're gonna definitely make use of the resources of Dathomir, maybe the other witch clans like the Singing Mountain clan that's been recanonized with Tales of the Empire. But I don't know. I don't know if you can throw in Marin and Cal into this era and feel like it's worth it. If anything, I'd love for him to have some time off, focus on that 3rd game, and then if he does show up in live action, maybe do some stuff with Mark Hamill. If you can do a couple of, like, special presentations, with Mark Hamill where it's not an entire show, but you get to do some cool things with him during his academy years, and then let him voice the character animation and have Hamill again voice Luke in animation and do a little bit more expanded stuff there. Cal is part of the path with Kunlun tying into a Ventress story. If it happens in the game, right? If he's continuing the path, I don't think there's really any indication that Tanalorr is gonna become the huge hub, especially with that Star Destroyer hanging over Tanalorr's system now, right? Not Tanalorr. What's the name of the planet that they're on? Uh, I'm Blanking. Agrees. Where is Grease's cantina? Let me look at that. Kobo. All right. So yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, with that Star Destroyer over Kobo being in close enough vicinity, I don't know how successful they're gonna be. I feel like a lot of stuff can be explored there, even more High Republic stuff. Uh, Definitely new, interesting Force-related things that both Marin and Cal aren't connected to or aware of, and throwing in Quinlan and Ventress into it, I don't know. And I feel like they're gonna be handled in the animation, especially Asajj. She's gonna be brought back. You have to explain why she's alive, and then have a proper, concrete end. And I think animation makes sense for her. That's where she became a star back in '03, and that's where she should end. Honestly, Quinlan, I also don't mind if if he lives or dies. We know he's there by the time Obi-Wan Kenobi, but is that still with Asajj, or is Asajj already dead at that point? Who knows? Um, but if we're gonna do a character, I would love for Reva. I think I wanted her, especially with Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out, knowing that's canonically set around the same time as Survivor. I was like, oh my god, yeah, this is a great time to have some synergy there. Didn't happen. And I found that pretty strange to not have Reva's story be continued. And I thought that would have been a great way to do it. Maybe they just didn't have plans for that. Maybe they thought she'd be lot better received, even though I thought Moses did a great job. She just was given weaker writing, and I thought she was great in the finale. But you are obviously are going to be focused on the Obi-Wan Vader rematch, and they definitely cut not cut corners, but they definitely pushed the envelope to where and why the she's able to get Luke, almost get Luke, knock him out, but she doesn't see, right? It was weird. And I agree with some of the plot holes. I don't love some of the interrogation stuff. I don't like that she's a little bit more of an upstart compared to the fifth brother and all that. But I still like thematically, like giving into your own anger to defeat anger only hurts you, not the others, right? So I would love for her to return in Jedi 3. I think that'd be a very interesting way for her to show up, to see like the final ruins of the Inquisitorius, a little bit more of like secret ways of fighting back at the Empire and their force sensitives and users and technology or whatnot. That's how I would do it. But even then, she wouldn't be like a main character. She'd be like a Malicos where she gets to have like a planet where she's at, helps out, or maybe she's against helping out, or maybe attacks Cal, and then we kind of finish her story there. Okay. I'll probably stream for 4 or 5 more minutes here. So get in some of your guys' last questions. It was a pretty good stream. A lot of great questions. Um, Make sure to send a super chat. It all goes to the channel. It all helps out me and Liam. Uh, yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying these lives during it's a bit of a dead period between Skeleton Crew and Andor, which is also going to be a lot shorter. But yeah, check out all our videos. Check out our community polls that have been going on in the post section. We'll have our Discord up and running when Liam is back. We'll be upgrading our uh, just our graphics in general on the channel, how our lives look. We'll have chat integrated. Maybe we'll be dual streaming to like TikTok and stuff to kind of spread out the audience, get a little bit more people there. Definitely trying to make the social media a lot more of a focus moving forward. Yeah, and then uh, to answer your questions here, Malachus was so hard to beat. David says, yeah, he was very frustrating, especially with like the Cray-esque floating lightsabers. And the way Marin kind of jumped in and out of the battle was kind of weird at times. Like I would I the f- when I my first playthrough, I did not get enough stims. I had only like had the max of like 3-ish stims, but at that point, I think you're able to get like 5 stims. But yeah, Mrs. Mandarin says, I like Moses, but I did not like that story. How does Anakin change his mind when he did the massacre? Feel bad for all the hate Moses received. Marin didn't help. Yeah, Marin did not help. She just kind of jumped in, spooky, grabs, holds, leaves. um, yeah, I did not like that story. Yeah. How does Anakin change? I'll answer this last one before you go, Miss Mandarin. I don't think he changes his mind. I think it's more he takes ownership, right? He takes ownership of it, like, for Obi-Wan's sake, like, and it's a moment of clarity. Even though he is still dark, he still wants to attack and kill everything, including his past. He wants Obi-Wan to be broken for what he puts onto Obi-Wan, not because, "Oh, I shouldn't have cut you down." It's like, "No, no. I made all those decisions. You didn't cause a whole every single thing wrong about me. I made plenty, even if Palpatine manipulated me, even if the Jedi held things back from me." Um, I don't think there's anything about Kenobi show that refutes that. It's more that they squeeze in a fight and a mission for Obi-Wan that isn't the best executed, and it's sad because the old boy cinematographer was working with Deborah, and I know she does shaky cam, but the shaky cam in it was really bad. Jabin was supposed to be way bigger, was supposed to connect to Battle of Jakku rumors of flashbacks to that, which would have been so essential to showing some of the darker elements of Obi-Wan and Anakin's early Clone Wars relationship before the Clone Wars begins and he's already united and all that. But yeah, I don't know exactly what you're saying there, Miss Mandarin. But yeah, and I agree if you don't love Reva. I think she's nowhere close to the second sister. Yeah, Leia under the trench coat, David was very rough, but I still like it all the same. It feels very prequel trilogy-esque to me, like very messy in a lot of ways. Not the best execution, but, it feels like a good wholesome meal for me. Ahsoka also feels the same way. It kinda peters out there a bit at the end with some of, like, the sets and some of the conveniences that are on Thrawn and everything on Peridea. It's so good for those for 5, 6 episodes, but could have done a little bit more of those last 2. But yeah, yeah. Flaws and all, not everything's gonna be Andor. I don't think Andor would have been able to do what it did on top of adding, like, Force users and all that without having an even more of a budget. So, yeah. Yeah, coulda used the punch up. Again, COVID. It was very clearly COVID affected it. The old boy cinematographer was not well versed with the, volume technology. Only person who's been versed with that is Greg Fraser, and Greg Fraser worked on the Batman at that point, so he was not anywhere near available. And Deborah was still relatively fresh in experience. I don't love her shaky cam, but she knew how to hold her shots in the emotional moments needed for episodes of The Mandalorian. I never understood that for Obi-Wan Kenobi, where you don't wanna spend time with the characters. Yeah, and like the punch-ups, they should have de-aged more the Obi-Wan and Anakin a little bit more, especially Hayden, for if they're gonna do a Clone Wars flashback, right? Once you put a wig on him or get him in military clothing, it's a lot easier to play off as like, "Oh, they're worn out from the war." But yeah, the punch-ups come from the lack of expertise with the volume, which was a mistake. Also shows in Book of Boba Fett too. Um, but yeah, definitely in Kenobi, Jabin was cut short. All the episodes were probably 1 or 2 minutes shorter at minimum. I think even to some degree, even the Grand Inquisitor probably would have looked a lot better. Yeah. Hayden looked 40 in the Clone Wars training session. Yeah, he's not Clone Wars. That's apparently supposed to be set just before Attack of the Clones, which is even harder because he's got the braid still, right? So you can kind of work around Obi-Wan a little bit, and I like when films and TV shows do this thing where you have older characters remnants about the past. A great example is Defy Bloods, a Spike Lee film, where it's the actors kinda wearing a little bit of hair dye or just dressed up to look younger, and then they're interacting with their old dead comrade, played by, again, the indomitable but sadly gone Chadwick Boseman, right? Like, that works there, but that's like a very intentional filmmaking choice. That wasn't really the intention there, and that like in the BETS that shows the dots and everything. So they did do some de-aging. They just did so much less than they did um in Ahsoka. Ahsoka Hayden looks perfect. He's maybe a little puffier here and there, but I'd rather him look a little bit puffier than like looking like he's been awake for like 2 days straight and has a bad hangover. Yeah, definitely rip Chadwick, rip Chadwick. But, okay, guys, I think this is a good place to end the stream. Thank you guys for joining, David and Mrs. Mandarin especially, Anthony Tiff as always, Brandon Tran, you as well. For people watching on the replay, uh, don't forget, you can always leave a reply and we'll reply there too. It's gonna be a fun time. Oh, sorry, David, I'll get to the last question. Young Ahsoka actress coming back? Maybe. She already played basically Siege of Mandalore, right? So what else would she play? Maybe pre-Rebels Ahsoka. I think she also probably isn't gonna grow much taller to match Rosario's height too. I don't know. They'll have to I feel like they'll just find somebody else. There was a rumor that there's someone else entirely cast, for that early adult, mid-20s Ahsoka, but yeah, who knows? But, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching the stream. Make sure to check out our Mask of Fear book review. It's an awesome book, especially if you're an Andor fan, if you're trying to get into the Andor hype. It's the first book in a trilogy leading into the Dark Times era. This is right after Revenge of the Sith. Next one is gonna be sometime in between the middle of the Dark Times, and then the last one is gonna be a lot closer to Rogue One, Rebels, and all that stuff. It's a great book. It really scratches the Andor itch. I'm very curious to see if it's gonna have an effect on Andor season 2 because there seems like there's at least some consultation done with Tony Gilroy, but like some of the motivations and like the proto Bail Organa, proto Mon Mothma, proto Saw Gerrera character arcs there. Fantastic book, super long too, but Alexander Freed did a great job. Rebecca Roanhorse, I believe, does the next film book, or and then who does the third book? Let me check here. Uh, yeah, yeah. Rebecca Roanhorse is gonna do the second, and the third will be from Fran Wild, who did a story from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi. Rebecca Roanhorse is known for her book set just before Episode 9, Resistance Reborn, right? So it'll be very interesting to see them pick up after Alexander Reed. He's done a great job with like Alphabet Squadron, Twilight Company, and all that. So we'll see what he does, but it should be fun for sure, for sure. Um, I wonder how much if he's gonna like, be around and committed to the oversight of those books. But I'm rambling here. Go check it out. Go check out a review. I think it's one of our stronger reviews too, honestly. Um, just a great book, all in all. Make sure to check out all our tier list that we dropped, all our other videos, and our season 2 trailer reaction, all the community polls, like I said. Um, it's gonna be a great time on Star Wars Labs once Liam comes back. We'll start implementing a lot of our changes. TikTok or socials will finally be updated outside of Twitter and Blue Sky, right? We'll finally put a lot of our plans in motion and get a lot more community presence and speak with you guys a little bit more directly and maybe make some more clipped out videos from our lives and all that. So stay tuned for sure. It's gonna be a fun time. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.